I'm Ryan Green. I'm the president of the board of the South Portland Cape Elizabeth Community Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to introduce Cullen Ryan. He's done amazing work in the community. I first met him through United Way of Southern Maine's Thrive 2027 initiative, focusing on financial stability and housing. I find this man incredibly inspiring, and I hope you do too. Take it away, Cullen.
Thank you, Orion. That's really kind of you to say. And right back at you. You do amazing work. I'm going to start us off in a weird direction. We're going to talk about a particular portion of the population that is chronically homeless and how important it is to make sure that we get this small group of people into housing. And it's simply because when we don't, they are ricocheting through all of our most expensive emergency systems. But again, I'm Cullen Ryan with Community Housing in Maine. We're a small nonprofit that focuses on housing homeless and special needs populations. And we do everything in collaboration with like 55 different organizations. So we do the housing, try to pull people together to do services and make this all work. But this small group of people essentially that are chronically homeless, and they number in the few hundred across the entire state. But when they're unhoused, they are basically often in a cycle of ricocheting through all of our most expensive emergency systems. And I mean, when they touch the jail, it's $943 a day, and they're often there for a couple weeks because of really simple things like getting into a disagreement, which if you did in the privacy of your own home, no one would ever know, and this might be commonplace that this would happen. But boy, if somebody's outside and they get into a disagreement, people get worried and they call the police, and the police don't know what to do, so they throw somebody in jail. They're entangled in the criminal justice system for a little while. They get back out. That's costing a lot of money. Or they go to the emergency room, and they're often there. So this small group we've figured out from working in the last 9 years, 20 organizations to house, I think we've housed 496 members of this population in the last 9 years working together. They've had about a 90% success rate in that housing, and we figured out in the last 3 years that we knew on by name basis if they were touching the jail or the hospital. And it turns out that the same population, the only difference is whether they're housed or not, is up to 57 times, not percent, but times more likely to be in jail when unhoused than when housed, and up to 29 times more likely to be in the hospital when unhoused than housed. So we know it's a hospital is $1,000 a day, and often that can lead to all of their expenses. If any of you have happened to go to the emergency room, it adds up really quickly. That's what's going on, and if you try to use the emergency room, you'll find out that they'll probably give you a bed in the hallway because it's overcrowded, because some of the same people are just going there night after night because there's no place for them to go. When we house this population, they all but stop touching all these emergency systems. In fact, in December of just this last year, out of our lists of people, again, hundreds of names on them, there were 430 people who are still alive that we've housed. Not a single member of the group of people who were housed touched either the jail or the hospital. But out of the small group that we have yet to house, it was about 130 back then. We had 14 people incarcerated in jail and 4 people in the hospital. So just night and day, a small group, huge portion, large group, 0. That's what happens. That's how different it is. What stops the cycle is when we move the people into housing. What we need to do that is housing navigation services. And I'm really glad that Victoria is here because she's going to talk about what they do, and it's helping people to get into housing. People need help to navigate that. Housing is expensive, there's little of it, and oftentimes we need to really work with relationships, both with people to get them in there and landlords to help them to stay there. And then we need to provide support services. And we can get people out of this cycle from any part of it. If we work together, you can get them if they're touching the jail or the hospital or other systems. If we're all working together, we can exit this system and get people into housing. We don't have to wait until they're all done with this or wait till they're all done with that. That is with these housing navigations on each end of that spectrum. So if we get these systems working to get people into housing, each time they're part of the system, that's great. But there's one thing missing, and that is coordination. And that's what we're doing by pulling people together so that everybody knows who is doing what to get people housed and to keep them housed. And that kind of coordination is the magic piece that ties it all together. Any kind of housing will do. We're talking for this population, permanent supportive housing, which is affordable housing that is enriched with support services. It is expensive to do. It costs about $16,000 a year to have somebody in that. Again, the rent is about $13,000 of that, $3,000 for services. But compare that to touching the emergency room and the jail and the police and the fire and the rescue, and then businesses, the impact of people who are outside and not connected. It's far more expensive to leave people unhoused than it actually is to house them. And the outcomes are amazing once we get people housed. And again, we've tried all these different types of services. One of the things we're trying is ultra low barrier services that welcome people right in. We're being innovative to figure out ways to get everybody into housing. Thank you very much.
So you can tell from Cullen Ryan that housing is the elephant in the room. Whether you're thinking about criminal justice reform, you're thinking about poverty abatement, you're thinking about mental health, housing ties to everything. So a little overview of how we're going to do this tonight. We want to hear from you, the community. So we have some amazing people doing amazing work, and we're going to very quickly touch upon some of the work they're doing. But we're going through this very quickly so that you can then share your experiences, your questions, your needs, your ideas, because this is all about you. Your ideas, this is your community. You are the ones who are going to make it happen. And these people are inspiring and will give us some ideas, but it's we as a community that are going to implement some of these ideas and turn these housing challenges into opportunities. And that's why I'm super excited to welcome Victoria Morales, Executive Director of the Quality Housing Coalition, to talk about some of her work.
Thanks, Orion. And I got to mention, I learned everything I know about housing from this man right here, Cullen Ryan. He's brilliant. And everything that he just said, I encourage everyone to look it up and take some time with it. Thank you all for having me. This is a fantastic event. Housing really, I've been asked to talk about the human aspect of housing, and I thought, is there any other aspect of housing that exists, really, if we're really thinking about it? Because, as Cullen said, if you don't have a home, you can't thrive. You can't thrive in your education, in your health, in your profession, and that's not great for communities, as we've heard. It's also not great for the economy. So it's really important that we think about the kinds of housing that folks really need. We do housing navigation, as Cullen said, and that's just very intricate hand-holding sort of accompaniment to get folks who are experiencing housing insecurity or homelessness into an available rental unit. If any of you, are any of you renters? With show of hands. So you probably know what it's like to try to get into a rental unit, particularly in the low vacancy rates that we have today. I would say it's akin to trying to buy a house. It's very tricky, right? You have to go through lots of different steps, particularly if it's your first time. And so we help folks to get there. And we've been able to, in the last 7 years, house over 800 households, over 2,000 adults and children. All of them had experienced homelessness before, and 99% of them have remained stably housed. But what I really want to talk to you today, too, is a little bit more about South Portland. I live here. I love South Portland. I've been living here since 2004. And I think the data around the humans that live here really matter. And I just want to note some of that as we're thinking about the work that is to be done in housing. So from our 2019 report that the city commissioned, we have about 6,885 homeowners and 3,971 renters. Now, the fair market rent today for renters for a 1 to 2 bedroom is between $1,800 and $2,400 a month. It's very, very expensive. And the report back in 2022 said that would be the number for 2030, but it's the numbers today. Our evictions are higher than they've ever been, our eviction filings in a decade. It's important to note that, but they're not that high as a state. We're only about 5,800, still too high, but it's a number that we can manage if we really do this right and devote the dollars to it. And this is a number in our census. I don't know how many of you look at our data in our census, but I can't ever stop thinking about this line that about 12% of South Portland residents move year to year. So they're not in the same home that they were the year before. And I think it's a really important data point to note, particularly when we're looking at our McKinney-Vento students. Those are children who are experiencing homelessness, who are students. As of December 2023, we had 323 students It's very hard to learn as a student when you don't have a place to live or a stable place to live. We have 8% of our population in South Portland living in poverty, but 14% of children under 18 are living in poverty. So I want to just tell two brief stories, and maybe it's only one, depending on the time I have. The first one is a woman that I'll just name as Liza, who we worked with at Quality Housing Coalition a couple years ago. Liza had 4 children, experienced interpersonal violence in her home, resulting in an eviction from her partner, ended up living in her car. Her children attended South Portland schools. 2 of them were preschool age. One was a baby, one was preschool age, not yet in preschool. And the other 2 were special needs children who were receiving special education services in South Portland, which is an excellent program. She was opting to live in her car because to receive those special education services, and she did that for a number of months until we were able to find her housing. We could not find her housing in South Portland. It is very, very hard. All you renters know this. It's very hard to find housing in South Portland for renters. As you probably know, most of the, about 80% of our renter households are private sector, and South Portland Housing Authority has 800 units that are below market, low income. They're doing an excellent job. But again, the vacancy rate is so low, it's very tricky to get folks in. We were able to find her a unit in Lewiston. That's far. She wanted to keep her children in South Portland because they were receiving such excellent special education services. But because we found the unit and the lease started on June 29th and not July 1, she wasn't allowed, offered transportation services because it's not allowed just on the date that you move in. So she had to travel back and forth and is still doing that today in the hopes that she can get back to South Portland, which is the community that she wants to live in and where she's been. The second story I want to tell is really about the children and how I really think we have to, if we're going to focus on any humans at all, let's focus on our children here in South Portland and the housing insecurity that they are facing. When Thornton Commons was being proposed, and that's at the end of my road, this was a few years ago, it was a very tricky project to get funded, to get approved. And I remember there were 2 of us who lived on the road, me and a teacher, and we showed up to every meeting, and there were so many. And we were the only 2 who were there in support of this project to say, yes, while we don't want the church to go away, the church is going away, we need housing, and this is a perfect location for it. And something around, I think it was 27 or 29 children were going to be able to live in a subsidized unit that was in walking distance to the school. And it was so critical. But I can't tell you how disappointing it was to walk up to the microphone to speak, and I probably showed up to 6 or 7 different meetings, and to hear snickers in the commentary and in the section saying, she's going to talk about the children again. I kid you not, this is what was happening. And it's true, because we really have to think about stable housing for our young people. So I'm really pleased that we are moving in this direction. Thank you, Orion, for hosting today.
Thank you, Victoria. As I said, we're going to have a chance to potentially hear more stories and more about each of the work of these amazing individuals.